and the omnibus. So I was forced into the Archers when I was a child. And look, it's come back to bite me later on. I'm awash with this stuff.
The Archers is the world's longest-running radio show, with more than 15,000 episodes broadcast. Despite being a rural flavor show, The Archers is recorded in the heart of...
Welcome to The Debate. Today, we're dissecting a fundamental friction point in the human operating system. It's really the conflict between the map and the terrain. The map being, our set of principles, our ethical codes, our definitions of success, our commitment to absolute truth. And the terrain, well, that's the messy, often dangerous reality of the world as it actually is. We're looking at this through the lens of a rural community facing a convergence of crises, economic scarcity, career stagnation, and some very volatile interpersonal relationships.
It really is the classic philosophical battle, isn't it? Deontology versus consequentialism, but played out in a muddy farmyard. We have characters asking themselves, do I stick to a rule because it's right, or do I, break the rule because I just need to survive the afternoon? The material we're looking at presents a fascinating case study in what happens when these high-minded ideals collide with some very low-supply realities.
And that brings us to the core question of this session. Is it better to hold fast to an ideal standard, even if it incurs a heavy loss? Or is the superior strategy to adjust one's behavior to secure the best immediate outcome? I'm taking the position of principle. I'm going to contend that without a rigid adherence to values, whether that's fair pricing, professional ambition, or just plain honesty, we lose our agency. We become drifters, sort of reacting to the world rather than shaping it.
And I will take the side of pragmatism. My argument is that a principle is a luxury good. When resources are scarce, be that money, safety, emotional bandwidth, context has to dictate action. You cannot eat a moral victory. We're going to see that in almost every instance here. The characters who fail to adapt to the reality on the ground, they're the ones who end up suffering. While the pragmatists, well, they survive to fight another day.
Okay, let's establish our positions clearly before we dive into this specific evidence. My stance is that the reality you speak of is often just a rationalization for cowardice or convenience. When we look at David Archer, for example, we see a man attempting to hold the line against economic exploitation when he refuses to buy hay from Eddie because the price is extortionate, labeling it profiteering. He is performing a vital social function. He is signaling that some behaviors are just unacceptable regardless of the pressure. If we don't draw these lines, we are complicit in the degradation of our own community.
That is a very noble sentiment that leads directly to an empty barn. My position is that the social function of a decision is frankly irrelevant if the primary objective fails. And David's objective is to feed his horses. By standing on a high moral bluff, he fails that objective. My argument extends to the situation with Amber and Chelsea as well. We see characters being pressured to conform to these abstract ideas of success or truth, when their actual lived experience suggests that a smaller, safer, or quieter path is what keeps them functional. Pragmatism isn't about abandoning ethics. It's about acknowledging the constraints of the system you are currently, trapped in.
Let's test that theory right away with the economic crisis. This situation with David, Lillian, and Eddie it's a textbook example of a market failure driven by a clash of values.
It's certainly a clash. You have David Archer, who believes in a fair price, and then you have Eddie, who believes in market price.
Well, it's more than just a difference of opinion. David calls Eddie's pricing ridiculous. He explicitly links it to profiteering during a war, which frames this as a moral transgression. So when David refuses the deal initially, he is acting on a principle of justice. He recognizes that Eddie is a chancer, a sentiment Lillian agrees with, and he refuses to reward that behavior. If David just capitulates immediately, he validates the price gouging. He sets a precedent that the community will pay any price, which only drives inflation higher for everybody.
But just look at the immediate feedback loop. David stands on principle. He says no. What happens? The material is very specific here. David is left lying awake worrying. The The supplies are so low he doesn't know how he's going to manage. The stress response is immediate. The principal didn't fix the problem. It compounded it. David isn't shaping the market. The market is absolutely crushing him.
But wait, the story doesn't end with his refusal. The nuance here is really important. David and Lillian do attempt to engage in a pragmatic negotiation after the initial shock wears off. They talk about knocking him down a bit on price or offering a slightly reduced rate if they buy in bulk. This proves David isn't a martyr, he's a negotiator. He is trying to impose a framework of fairness on the transaction. He wants the hay, but he wants it on terms that don't, destroy his dignity or his bank account.
And that hesitation is exactly where he loses. While David is busy constructing this framework of fairness, basically trying to teach Eddie a lesson in business ethics, the market moves on without him. We learn that a grateful farmer simply got their checkbook out and bought the whole lot.
Which is tragic.
It's not tragic, it's efficient. Eddie calls it a chance too good to miss. That other farmer saw a resource they needed, saw the price, and paid it. They didn't agonize over the morality of Eddie's markup, they secure the asset. And now David is left with nothing but his principles and hungry horses. This is the fatal flaw of your position. The market does not pause for your moral deliberation. In a crisis, speed is a quality all its own.
Everyone acted like David, Eddie would be forced to lower his prices. David is trying to act as a corrective force. The fact that he failed doesn't make him wrong, it just makes him a victim of a broken system. And let's look at his regret. He admits, "I am now regretting saying no." You might read that as him admitting he was wrong, but I read that as the pain of being forced to compromise.
I read it as him realizing he miscalculated his leverage. He thought he had the power to set terms. He didn't. And interestingly, his attempt to crawl back to Eddie to try and haggle after the hay was already gone, it shows that his principles were fluid anyway. He was willing to compromise eventually. He just did it too late to get the benefit. If you're going to be a pragmatist, do it while the goods are still for sale.
I think we have to agree to disagree on David's moral standing, though the outcome was certainly unfavorable for him. But I want to pivot to a different kind of marketplace, the marketplace of talent and ambition. We have this conflict between Amber and Chelsea regarding Chelsea's career path.
Right. This is a fascinating inversion of the last dynamic. In the hay scenario, you argued for the standard of fair pricing. Here, you seem to be aligning with Amber, who's pushing for the standard of high achievement.
Correct. Amber looks at Chelsea and sees wasted potential. She tells her, "You could maybe think about going to one of those big salons." She implies Chelsea could take over the world if she applied herself. This is the principle of obligation. If you possess a talent, and Amber insists Chelsea is talented, you have a sort of moral duty to develop that talent to its fullest extent. Doing hair in a kitchen while juggling 9 different jobs is an inefficient use of human capital.
That phrase, take over the world, is very telling. It reveals Amber's worldview, not Chelsea's. Amber is projecting a standard narrative of success, stability, prestige, specialization. But Chelsea pushes back, and hard, against this. She says explicitly, "I like the freedom that I've got now and the variety."
But is it freedom or is it chaos? Amber notes that Chelsea is working 9 jobs. Chelsea corrects her, it's 3 jobs, or at least 2. She doesn't even seem to have a firm count. That lack of structure to me suggests she's drifting. The big salon represents a structural discipline that would allow Chelsea to focus and excel. By rejecting it, Chelsea is settling for mediocrity under the guise of freedom.
I strongly disagree. I think Chelsea is the ultimate pragmatist here. She has designed a life that fits her actual needs, not society's expectations. The big salon comes with a boss, set hours, corporate politics. Chelsea values autonomy over status. She says she likes the variety. She has optimized her life for happiness, not for output. Amber's pressure is actually, I think, quite invasive. She's trying to force Chelsea into a box that Chelsea knows she won't fit in. Why should Chelsea be miserable at a top-tier salon just to satisfy Amber's abstract principle of potential?
Because comfort is the enemy of growth.
Introducing the Archer's mug, where elegance meets everyday comfort. Crafted from premium white ceramic, designed with vibrant peekaboo colors inside, simple, modern, and stylish. Start your day the Archer's way, with warmth, familiarity, and the comfort of voices you've come to love. As the stories unfold on the Archers, let this mug become part of your daily ritual, a small reminder of life in Ambridge. Practical for every home, dishwasher and microwave safe. Available in 2 sizes, 11 ounces and 15 ounces, designed to fit your lifestyle. Enjoy your favorite drink in a mug that connects you to Britain's most beloved countryside story, The Archers. For more information, and to order your very own The Archers mug, follow the link below and make it part of your daily routine.
Amber is trying to push Chelsea out of her comfort zone because she sees what Chelsea's capable of. Isn't that the role of a friend? To demand more from us than we demand of ourselves? Chelsea claims she likes the freedom, but is that just a defense mechanism because she's afraid of the pressure of a real career?
Or maybe she just likes doing hair in the kitchen. You're assuming that up is the only direction that matters. Pragmatism argues that sustainable is the most important metric, and Chelsea's current setup is sustainable for her mental health. The big salon is a high-risk venture that solves a problem she doesn't even have.
I suppose it depends on whether you view a career as a vehicle for lifestyle or a vehicle for contribution. But let's move to where the stakes are highest. We aren't talking about hay or hair anymore. We are talking about the future of a child, the situation with Amber, George, and Brad.
This is the emotional core of it all.
It is, and it's where the tension between truth and safety becomes absolute. Amber is pregnant. She admits she literally forgot that we did it, which, that suggests a profound level of dissociation or denial. But the biological fact remains. George is the father. My argument is simple. You cannot build a life on a foundation of deception. Amber's reluctance to tell George, her rationale that if I tell George, then it's real, is just magical thinking. It is an explicit rejection of reality.
It is magical thinking, yes, but let's look at why she's engaging in it. We have to analyze the threat assessment here. George is not a stable variable. Amber describes him as being awful to everyone. Eddie, who is usually quite stoic, says he can't forgive him for saying all those things to everyone he loves. George has lashed out, he is volatile.
Volatility does not excuse the theft of a father's right to know, nor does it justify Amber living a lie.
It absolutely justifies a strategic delay. Amber is 19 years old. She's terrified. My argument is that her hesitation is a survival mechanism. She is seeking safety before she initiates a conflict. She explicitly contrasts George with Brad. She feels safe with Brad because he is kind and considerate. Brad thinks before he speaks. Amber is instinctively moving toward the stable element, Brad, and away from the unstable one, George, to secure her own emotional footing. That is a pragmatic necessity. If she tells George now while she's this vulnerable, the explosion could destroy her ability to cope.
But by involving Brad and excluding George, she's creating a false reality that will inevitably collapse. She is using Brad as a human shield. That isn't fair to Brad, and it certainly isn't fair to the child. Lillian provides the counterexample here. Lillian apologizes to Eddie for bottling George, for physically attacking him. She admits that despite George's provocation, her reaction was wrong. She takes accountability. Amber is refusing to take accountability for the biology of the situation.
Lillian can afford to take accountability. The fight is over. Amber is in the middle of the crisis. And I want to highlight Chelsea's advice to Amber, which I think is the most sound, pragmatic wisdom in the whole transcript. Chelsea says, work out what you want.
Which sounds incredibly selfish.
It's not selfish, it's clarifying. Chelsea is telling Amber to define her own desires before she introduces the chaos of George's reaction. If Amber tells George immediately out of some principle of honesty, she hands the steering wheel to George. She loses control of the narrative. By waiting, by leaning on Brad, who represents the thinking, pragmatic approach, she buys herself time to figure out a plan. You call it deception, I call it a buffer zone.
It's a buffer zone built on sand. Amber says, if I tell George, then it's real. She believes she can control reality by controlling information. That is a dangerous delusion. The truth is an external force. It doesn't care if you acknowledge it. By delaying, she is only increasing the blast radius when the truth finally comes out. And it will come out.
Perhaps, but maybe by the time it comes out, she'll be strong enough to handle it. That's the gamble of pragmatism. You trade a clean conscience today for a better survival probability tomorrow.
I find that trade unacceptable. It erodes the integrity of everyone involved. But there is another character grappling with fear and reality, and that is Paul. His driving lesson with Rory offers a perfect parallel to Amber's paralysis.
Ah, Paul, the man who is afraid of the narrow road.
Exactly. Paul is paralyzed by the principle of harm. He asks, what if I hit a cow? He's terrified of killing someone. He is operating under a moral imperative that says, if there is a risk of doing catastrophic harm, I should not act. This is a decent, principled stance. He understands the lethal responsibility of operating a vehicle.
It's decent, but it's debilitating. Rory acts as the voice of pragmatism and evidence. Paul perceives the road as narrow. That's a subjective fear. Rory points out the objective reality. You're on an actual road. There is room for a truck. Rory deconstructs Paul's abstract terror with concrete facts.
But notice why Paul is afraid. It's because he cares. Rory actually explicitly values this trait in Paul. He tells him, you're so obviously decent. He contrasts Paul with his previous partners who are not very good for me. Rory is attracted to Paul specifically because Paul has these principles, because he worries about doing the right thing. If Paul were just some reckless pragmatist who didn't care about the cows or the pedestrians, Rory wouldn't be interested.
That is a crucial point. Rory loves the principle, but he needs the practice. He values Paul's decency, but he effectively says, I love that you don't want to kill anyone, but please press the accelerator. The principle makes Paul a good person, the pragmatism makes him a driver. If Paul stays stuck in the principle phase, the car never moves. He fails the test. He has to trust Rory's evidence over his own internal fear.
But he only trusts Rory because Rory respects his fear. It's a symbiosis. Paul provides the moral caution. Rory provides the operational confidence. This supports my broader argument. Pragmatism without principle is just reckless. Rory needs Paul's decency just as much as Paul needs Rory's push.
I'll concede the symbiosis in the car. But let's zoom out to the broader landscape we've covered. In the case of David Archer, his decency lost him the hay. In the case of Amber, her fear of reality is driving her into the arms of a man who isn't the father of her child. In every single case, the adherence to an internal standard, an ought, creates friction with the external world, the is.
Friction is necessary for traction. That's my closing argument. If David had just paid the price without a second thought, he would have contributed to the degradation of the local economy. He felt the friction of injustice and he stopped. That stop was the moral act. The regret he feels is simply the cost of having a conscience. You can't measure the value of a principle by the immediate material outcome. Sometimes doing the right thing means losing the hay.
And that is where we fundamentally diverge. When you are responsible for others, like David is for his horses or Amber is for her baby, the outcome is the only metric that matters. Principles are wonderful things to have when the pantry is full, but when winter is coming or when a volatile ex-partner is looming, you have to adapt. David tried to be principled, and then he tried to be pragmatic, too late. He ended up with the worst of both worlds. The grateful farmer, the big salon hairdressers, they're the ones moving the world forward because they engage with reality as it is.
They're moving the world, certainly, but in what direction? Toward higher prices and soulless corporate structures? If we simply adapt to whatever the market or a dangerous situation demands of us, we lose our compass. We become efficient, yes, but we cease to be autonomous.
And if we refuse to adapt, we become extinct. It seems our characters are all standing at that precise intersection. David, Amber, Chelsea, Paul, they are all realizing that the map they were given doesn't quite match the terrain they are walking on.
A terrifying realization. And as we saw with the hay, sometimes while you're standing there debating which path is right, someone else buys the resource right out from under you.
A sobering thought indeed. Speed has its own quality.
Thank you for listening to The Debate.
So what are you doing now?
Just getting ready for the next episode. Just moving mics around.
So what do you do?
I do the spot effects on the arches. Any
Are you what we
movements
call Foley then?
kind of. Yep.
Okay. And these are all part of the paraphernalia of production.
Yep. That's the bull bar. That's
this one.
Yep. That's.
Hayley so wanted to be in their own place when their baby came. It's due in 2 months. Not much chance of that now. No. I mean, it would have been a stretch for them financially, mind, but I just wish there was something practical I could do to help them, Caroline.
I think The Archers has had this immense popularity over the years, basically because it has always very accurately reflected the reality of life and living in a rural community at whatever